My parents told me to leave if I didn't give up my room. Now I own the house across from theirs. The day I signed the papers on the $3 million estate directly across from my parents' crumbling ranch house, I didn't feel victorious. I felt nothing at all. You won't believe what happened next. But before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 years ago, on a Tuesday evening, that would change everything. I stood in my childhood bedroom staring at the wall I had painted sage green 2 summers before. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a rage so pure. It felt almost crystalline. Downstairs, I could hear my younger sister Brittany laughing on the phone, her voice carrying up through the heating vents like she didn't have a care in the world. And why would she? She had just gotten exactly what she wanted. My name is Madison Clark, and at 28 years old, I had just been given an ultimatum by my own parents. Give up my bedroom to my sister, or get out. Simple as that. No negotiation, no family discussion, just a cold hard choice delivered over pot roast and mashed potatoes like they were asking me to pass the salt. I walked downstairs with my decision already made. My father sat in his recliner, watching the evening news with that same detached expression he always wore when he didn't want to deal with conflict. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with aggressive clinks and clatters that signaled her own discomfort, but certainly not her willingness to intervene. "I'll be out by the end of the month," I said. Both of them froze. I think they expected me to fold, to take the smaller bedroom, to shrink myself down once again to accommodate Brittany's never-ending needs. "Madison, your father didn't mean you had to actually leave," my mother started, her voice taking on that placating tone I had heard my entire life. "Yes, he did." I cut her off. "And honestly, Mom, I think it's time anyway." My father stood up then, and I saw something flicker across his face. Was it regret, concern? No. It was irritation. Irritation that I wasn't making this easier for him. "You're being dramatic," he said. "This is exactly why we worry about you. You're too sensitive, too proud, too proud." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I had spent 6 years living under their roof after college, paying $500 a month in rent, while contributing thousands more to household expenses, repairs, and family emergencies. I had covered my father's dental work the year before when his insurance fell short. $4,000 I transferred without hesitation. I had paid Brittany's car insurance for 8 months when she was between jobs. Again. I had bought the new refrigerator when theirs died because they didn't have the savings to cover it. And I was too proud. "I'm giving you 30 days notice," I said calmly. "I'll have my things out by the 15th. Brittany appeared in the doorway, then fresh from her phone call, her expression carefully arranged into something that might have passed us for sympathy if I hadn't known her my entire life. "Maddie, I never wanted it to be like this," she said, using the nickname I had told her years ago. I hated. "You know I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice." "You have dozens of other choices," I replied. "You just don't want to make any of them." "That's not fair," my mother interjected, but I was already walking toward the stairs. I spent that night in my room not packing, but planning. I opened my laptop and looked at my bank accounts. After 6 years of aggressive saving while living at home, I had accumulated $68,000. Not enough to buy a house in Austin's insane market, but enough for a solid down payment on a condo. Or enough to take a risk. I thought about my job as a pharmaceutical sales rep. The long hours, the constant travel, the decent salary that would keep me comfortable but never wealthy. And I thought about the real estate investment seminar I had attended 3 months earlier on a whim. The one where the speaker talked about house flipping and rental properties and building wealth through leveraging other people's money. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Please don't be rash. We can work something out. But we couldn't. That was the thing. This wasn't about the room. It had never been about the room. This was about a pattern that had played out my entire life. Brittany needed, I provided. Brittany struggled, I sacrificed. Brittany wanted, I gave. And somehow, I was the one being unreasonable for finally saying no. I spent the next 2 weeks apartment hunting during my lunch breaks and after work. Everything I could afford was either too small, too far from my office, or in neighborhoods that made my mother's earlier concerns about safety seem almost reasonable. On day 14, frustrated and exhausted, I sat in my car outside yet another depressing apartment complex and called my college roommate, Rebecca. Rebecca had gotten into real estate right after graduation and now owned 3 rental properties in Houston. Had always been impressed by her success, but never thought to ask how she did it. She answered on the second ring. Maddie, oh my God, it's been forever. What's up? I need your advice, I said. About real estate investing, she laughed. You miss? Play it safe. What happened to the pharmaceutical career? It's still happening, I said, but I need a change, a big one. I told her everything, not just about the room situation, but about feeling stuck, about watching my savings grow, but my life staying exactly the same, about being almost 30 and still living like I was 22. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. How much cash do you have available? She finally asked. 68,000, give or take. And your credit score? 745 last time I checked. Okay, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Here's what you're going to do. Over the next hour, parked in that depressing apartment complex parking lot, Rebecca gave me a crash course in real estate investing. She explained how to find undervalued properties, how to calculate after-repair value, how to work with contractors, how to secure financing, how to turn one property into two into four, into an entire portfolio. Start small, she said. Find a fixer-upper in a decent neighborhood. Put 20% down. Use the rest for renovations. Do most of the work yourself if you can. Rent it out. Repeat. What if I fail, I asked. Then you'll have learned more from failing than you ever would from playing it safe, she replied. But Maddie, I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to surprise yourself. The night I didn't sleep. I spent hours researching Austin real estate markets, watching YouTube videos about house flipping, reading investment forums. By morning, I had created a detailed spreadsheet and identified 3 potential properties to view. My parents barely spoke to me during those final 2 weeks. Brittany moved in 3 days before I moved out, taking over my room while I packed boxes in what used to be hers. The room was so small I could barely fit my bed and dresser. I slept there for 72 hours, and each night I lay awake on that twin mattress, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, and promised myself this would never happen again. I would never again put myself in a position where someone else controlled my housing, my security, or my choices. On moving day, I rented a U-Haul and loaded my belongings with the help of Rebecca, who had driven up from Houston for the weekend. My parents watched from the porch, my father with his arms crossed, my mother wringing her hands in that nervous gesture I knew so well. You know you can still change your mind, Mom called out as I carried the last box to the truck. I know, I said, but I won't. Brittany didn't even come outside. I had signed a lease on a studio apartment in a neighborhood my mother would have called questionable. It was 450 square feet, had a window that faced a brick wall, and the bathroom fan sounded like a helicopter taking off. It cost $900 a month, which was $400 more than I had been paying at home, and it was absolutely perfect. It was mine. That first night, sitting on my inflatable mattress, eating takeout Thai food, I felt more at home than I had in years. Rebecca stayed over sleeping on the couch. I hadn't bought yet. We actually just threw blankets on the floor, and we spent the evening refining my investment strategy. "You need to move fast," she said. "The market's heating up. Every month you wait is money you're losing." The next morning, I called a real estate agent Rebecca had recommended. Her name was Patricia, and she specialized in investment properties. I met her that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, and within minutes I knew I had found the right person. Patricia was in her 50s, had been investing in real estate for 30 years, and had no patience for hesitation or excuses. "Here's the truth," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "Most people never buy their first investment property because they're too scared. They wait for the perfect deal, the perfect timing, the perfect circumstances, and they wait forever." "I'm not most people," I said. She smiled. "Good. Let's go look at houses." Over the next 3 days, Patricia showed me 15 properties. Most were disasters. Terrible locations, structural issues, or priced too high for the work required. But property number 12 made my heart race the moment I walked through the door. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in a neighborhood that was clearly gentrifying. The house itself was rough. Really rough. Dated kitchen bathrooms from the 1970s carpet that probably violated several health codes. But the bones were good. Solid foundation, good roof, and the location was perfect, just 3 blocks from a new shopping development and 6 blocks from an elementary school that had recently been rated excellent. The asking price was $185,000, which was low for the area. I could see why. It needed at least $40,000 in renovations, but Patricia pulled up comparable sales, and recently renovated homes in the neighborhood were selling for $300,000 plus. "This is it," I said, standing in that disgusting living room with its brown paneled walls and stained carpet. "This is my first one." Patricia nodded. "Then let's make an offer." We offered $170,000. They countered at $178,000. I accepted. 3 weeks later, I sat at a closing table signing papers that felt about 10 feet high, using almost all of my savings for the down payment and closing costs. I walked out of that office owning a house. A disaster of a house, but mine. I gave myself 1 weekend to panic about what I had just done. Then Monday morning, I got to work. I had kept my pharmaceutical job, for now I needed the steady income, but every spare moment was devoted to the renovation. I spent evenings and weekends at that house, learning to demolish walls, install flooring paint tile, and do basic plumbing. YouTube became my best friend. I watched hundreds of hours of renovation tutorials, taking notes, pausing and rewinding until I understood each step. When I needed skilled help, I hired contractors for the essentials, electrical work, major plumbing, structural repairs, and I watched them work, asking questions, learning their techniques. My parents called occasionally during those first few months. Brief, uncomfortable conversations where they asked how I was doing, and I gave them brief, uncomfortable answers. They never asked about what I was working on, never expressed interest in my new life, and I never volunteered the information. 4 months after I bought it, I listed the renovated house for sale at $305,000. It sold in 6 days for $320,000. After closing cost mortgage payoff and renovation expenses, I walked away with $62,000 in profit. I had turned $68,000 into $130,000 in less than half a year, and I had learned more about construction business negotiation and myself than I had in the previous 6 years combined. I immediately started looking for property number 2. This time, I was smarter. I found a duplex that needed work, but was structurally sound. I could live in one unit while renovating and renting out the other. I paid $210,000 for it, put 20% down, and moved out of my studio apartment into a construction zone. For the next 8 months, I lived surrounded by sawdust and paint fumes. I renovated the second unit, first rented it out for $1,400 a month, then slowly worked on my own side while working full-time and scouting my next investment. My parents found out about my real estate ventures through my aunt, who saw one of my listings online and recognized the area. My mother called sounding surprised and vaguely hurt that I hadn't told them. "You're buying houses?" she asked. "How are you affording that?" I explained the concept of flipping and leveraging, but I could tell she didn't really understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand. There was something in her tone that suggested she thought I was being reckless, foolish, too big for my britches, as my father might say. "Well, just be careful," she finally said. "You know the housing market can be unpredictable." "I'll keep that in mind," I replied. Brittany, meanwhile, had posted photos on social media of my old room, now redecorated with her aesthetic. Lots of string lights and inspirational quotes on the walls. She tagged them with captions about fresh starts and family support. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't engage. By the end of my first year in real estate, I had flipped 2 more properties and kept the duplex as a rental. My portfolio was growing, and more importantly, I was learning to spot opportunities others missed. I understood now that wealth wasn't built through saving alone. It was built through taking calculated risks, through seeing value where others saw problems, through being willing to do work that others avoided. My pharmaceutical job had become something I did with about 60% of my attention, while the other 40% ran numbers, evaluated properties, and planned my next moves. My manager noticed my distraction and called me in for a conversation about commitment and career trajectory. I quit the next day. It should have been terrifying walking away from the steady paycheck and benefits. Instead, it felt like finally taking off a coat I had outgrown years ago. I was all in now, fully committed to building something that belonged only to me. Property 6 was my breakthrough. It was a small office building in an up-and-coming area. The previous owner had let it fall into disrepair, and businesses had moved out one by one. It was listed at $400,000, and everyone else saw a money pit. I saw potential. I offered $375, expecting negotiation. They accepted immediately, which should have been my first warning sign. But I had learned to trust my analysis over my anxiety, and my numbers said this could work. The renovation took 8 months and every dollar I had saved from previous flips. I converted it into mixed-use retail space on the ground floor co-working offices above. The neighborhood was filling with young professionals and small business owners who needed affordable workspace. I had found my niche. Within 3 months of completion, every unit was leased. The monthly rental income covered the mortgage and expenses, with enough left over to qualify for my next loan. This was the moment I understood what Rebecca had tried to explain 2 years earlier. I wasn't just buying properties anymore. I was building a business, an empire, if I was willing to think that big. By year 3, I owned 7 properties, 2 single-family homes I had renovated and sold, 3 duplexes all rented, the office building, and a small apartment complex I had just closed on 4 units that needed minor updates and some desperate attention to landscaping. I hired a property manager to handle day-to-day operations. I brought on an accountant to manage the increasingly complex finances. I formed an LLC. I was no longer just Madison who flipped houses. I was Madison Clark, real estate investor, with a portfolio worth over $2 million. I thought about my parents sometimes, usually late at night, when I was reviewing spreadsheets or lying awake running numbers in my head. I wondered if they had any idea what I had built. If they thought about the daughter they had pushed out over a bedroom. If Brittany ever mentioned me. I didn't reach out to find answers. Some doors once closed were better left that way. In the fall of year 3, Patricia called me about a property that had just hit the market. A luxury home in Westlake Hills, one of Austin's most prestigious neighborhoods. It was being sold as part of an estate sale, and the family was motivated to close quickly. The asking price was $3.2 million. It was ridiculous, way beyond anything I had considered. But Patricia insisted I at least look at it. I drove up the winding hillside road past gates and long driveways until I reached the address. The house was stunning. 5 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, infinity pool, overlooking the city's chef's kitchen, home theater, everything someone could want in a luxury property. But what made my breath catch was the view from the master suite balcony. Because directly across the valley, I could see a neighborhood I recognized, my parents' neighborhood, and if I had a decent pair of binoculars, I realized I would probably be able to see their house. What are the chances, Patricia said when I pointed it out? What are the chances, I repeated? The property needed minimal work, some updating, new paint professionals, staging, but it was move-in ready for the right buyer or the right owner. I made a cash offer of $2.9 million. It was accepted within 24 hours. 3 weeks later, I owned a $3 million estate with a view of my childhood neighborhood. I moved in on a Saturday morning, hiring professional movers to transport my belongings from the duplex I had been living in. As they unloaded furniture into rooms that seemed impossibly large compared to where I had started, I walked out onto that master suite balcony and looked across the valley. I could see their house, small and tired looking from this distance, in a neighborhood that had aged while others around it had flourished. Their cars, my father's truck, and my mother's sedan were parked in the driveway. I took out my phone, and for the first time in 3 years, I sent a text to my mother. "I bought a house. Thought you might want to visit sometime." She responded within minutes. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," where I gave her the address. Then I waited. It took less than 30 seconds for her to respond again. "This is in Westlake Hills, yes. Madison, how did you afford this real estate investment?" "Mom, like I told you I was doing." 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her next message came through. "We'd love to see it. When would be a good time?" I gave her the following Sunday at 2. Then I put my phone away and spent the rest of the day arranging furniture and planning exactly how I wanted this visit to go. Sunday arrived with perfect weather. Sunny, 75 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. I had hired a chef to prepare brunch not because I couldn't cook, but because I wanted everything to be perfect in a way that had nothing to do with showing off and everything to do with showing them exactly what they had underestimated. They arrived at exactly 2 o'clock in my father's aging truck, which looked even more out of place among the Mercedes and Teslas in my circular driveway. I watched from the front window as they sat in the car for a solid minute before getting out, taking in the house, the landscaping, the sheer scale of what I had achieved. My mother walked up the stone pathway in her church dress. My father wore slacks and a button-down shirt I had bought him 4 Christmases ago. Brittany was with them wearing designer sunglasses I was fairly certain she couldn't actually afford. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. "Welcome," I said. "Come in." They stepped into the 2-story foyer with its chandelier and sweeping staircase, and I watched 3 different versions of shock play across their faces. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father stood very still, his jaw tight. Brittany took off her sunglasses, slowly looking around with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Madison," my mother breathed. "This is your house." "This is my house," I confirmed. "Let me give you the tour." I walked them through every room. The chef's kitchen with professional-grade appliances. The home theater with stadium seating for 12. The wine cellar I was currently stocking. The home gym. The master suite with its spa bathroom and private balcony. The pool area with its outdoor kitchen and fire pit. I narrated like a realtor, pointing out features and recent renovations, keeping my voice steady and professional. My mother made small appreciative sounds. My father said nothing, his hands clasped behind his back like he was touring a museum. Brittany lagged behind, occasionally touching surfaces as if to verify they were real. When we finished the tour, I led them to the covered patio where brunch was laid out. Fresh fruit pastries, a variety of egg dishes, mimosas, in crystal glasses. We sat at the table overlooking the pool and the view beyond, and I poured coffee like we were old friends catching up, rather than family members who had barely spoken in 3 years. So my father finally said, breaking the silence, "You've done well for yourself." "I've worked hard," I corrected. "There's a difference." He nodded slowly. "I can see that." My mother reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. "We've missed you, Madison. Really missed you." I held her gaze. "You could have called, visited, showed any interest in my life at any point over the last 3 years." "We thought you needed space," she said, but her voice was uncertain. "You seemed so angry when you left." "I was angry," I agreed, "but that doesn't mean you couldn't have reached out, checked in, asked how I was doing." Brittany spoke up for the first time. "I wanted to," she said quietly, "but I didn't think you'd want to hear from me." I turned to look at her. "You took my room and acted like you had won something, like pushing me out was some kind of victory. Why would I want to hear from you?" Her face flushed. "I never asked them to make you leave. I just needed a place to stay." "You could have stayed in your own room," I said, "but that wasn't good enough for you. It never was." The silence that followed was heavy. My father shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the direct confrontation. "What do you want us to say?" "Madison," he asked finally, "that we were wrong, that we should have handled things differently." I picked up my coffee cup, holding it between both hands. "I don't want you to say anything, Dad. I wanted you to see what I built after you pushed me out. I wanted you to understand that when you made me choose between giving up my space and leaving, I chose myself. And that choice led to everything you see around you." My mother's eyes were shining with tears. "We didn't mean for it to happen this way." "But it did happen this way," I replied. "And now here we are." Brittany stood up abruptly, walking to the edge of the patio to look out at the view. When she turned back, her expression was complicated, somewhere between admiration and resentment. "Do you know what it's like," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "to realize your older sister has lapped you in life? To know that while I was moving back in with Mom and Dad, again last month after my marriage fell apart, you were buying a house worth more than I'll probably make in my entire lifetime." The room went very quiet. This was news to me. My mother looked down at her plate. My father's jaw tightened further. "You moved back in with them?" I asked. Brittany nodded. "In the spare bedroom of their condo. They had to sell the house last year." "Did you know that I didn't know that?" I glanced at my parents, waiting for explanation. "We downsized," my father said tersely. "The house was too much maintenance." But that wasn't the whole truth, and we both knew it. I had seen this coming 3 years ago when I left. The financial strain they never wanted to acknowledge. The poor planning. The way they always prioritized immediate comfort over long-term security. "I'm sorry that happened," I said, and I meant it. Not sorry enough to have prevented it by staying and continuing to bail them out, but sorry that they were facing the consequences of decades of choices. "We didn't want to burden you," my mother said softly. "You had made it clear you needed to focus on your own life. I did need that," I agreed. "And I still do." "So what now?" my father asked. "You invited us here to show us what we're missing, to prove some point. I invited you here because you're my family," I said, "and despite everything, I thought you should see what I've built. Not to hurt you, but to show you who I became when I stopped making myself smaller to accommodate everyone else's needs." My mother wiped her eyes. "We're proud of you, Madison." "We are. We just wish things could have been different." "Things are what we make them," I replied. You taught me that actually, just not in the way you intended. We finished brunch, making awkward small talk about property values and Austin's real estate market. Brittany asked a few questions about my investment strategy. Genuine curiosity, breaking through her earlier defensiveness. My father remained mostly quiet, processing everything in that internal way he had always dealt with uncomfortable emotions. When they left 2 hours later, my mother hugged me tightly at the door. "Can we do this again?" she asked. "Visit, I mean. Actually stay in touch." "We can try," I said. "But Mom, it has to be different than before. I'm not anyone's backup plan or ATM anymore. If we rebuild a relationship, it needs to be as equals." She nodded against my shoulder. "I understand." My father shook my hand formal and stiff. "You've built something impressive here, Madison. I hope you're happy with it." "I am," I said. Finally. I watched them drive away in that old truck past the manicured lawns and luxury vehicles that marked this neighborhood as somewhere they had always dreamed of belonging but never would. And I felt not triumph, but a quiet sense of closure. They had made their choices. I had made mine. The consequences had played out accordingly. Over the following months, we established a new rhythm. Monthly dinners, usually at restaurants on neutral territory. Careful conversations that skirted around the past while trying to build something resembling a future relationship. My mother sent me text messages about home improvement shows she watched, asking if that was how I had learned. My father forwarded articles about real estate market trends, his way of showing interest without having to say the words. Brittany and I had coffee twice, awkward at first, then gradually more honest. She was working retail while going back to school for a nursing degree, trying to rebuild her life after a difficult divorce. She admitted she had resented me, growing up, felt that I made everything look easy while she struggled with everything. She apologized for the room situation, though we both knew apologies couldn't change the past. I accepted her words and chose to let the resentment go. Not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger was exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. A year after that first visit, I sat on my master suite balcony, watching the sun set over Austin, a glass of wine in hand and my laptop open to spreadsheets detailing my latest acquisition. Property number 14, a small apartment building in an emerging neighborhood. The numbers looked good. The timing was right. I was ready to expand again. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Another property had hit the market. A commercial space, perfect for renovation into retail and office mixed use. She wanted to know if I was interested in looking tomorrow. I typed back a quick yes, always interested in the next opportunity. I thought about the girl I had been 3 years ago, standing in that cramped bedroom, facing an impossible choice. I thought about the fear and anger and determination that had driven me to take risks I didn't fully understand. I thought about every hammer swing, every failed negotiation, every night I had fallen asleep exhausted and woken up ready to keep building. Some people would call this revenge. My sister, who pushed me out now, lived with our parents in their downsized condo. My parents, who chose her needs over mine, now struggled with limited retirement income. And I lived in luxury overlooking the neighborhood where it all began. But revenge implied I had done this to hurt them. That wasn't accurate, and it wasn't complete. The truth was simpler and somehow more profound. I had done this to save myself, to prove that I was worth more than the role they had assigned me, to build a life where my value wasn't measured by how much I sacrificed for others, but by what I created for myself. Their pain, their regret, their diminished circumstances. Those were just the natural consequences of choices they had made. Choosing short-term comfort over long-term planning. Choosing to push out the daughter who contributed and enable the one who took. Choosing to see my boundary setting as selfishness rather than self-preservation. I didn't cause their situation. I simply refused to prevent it by staying and continuing to shield them from reality. The lights were coming on across the city. Somewhere down there, people were facing their own impossible choices, deciding whether to stay or go, whether to shrink or expand, whether to play it safe or bet on themselves. I raised my wine glass slightly, a private toast to the girl who had chosen herself 3 years ago, and to the woman she had become because of that choice. Success, I had learned, wasn't just about the money or the properties or the impressive address. It was about the freedom to build a life on your own terms, to set boundaries and keep them, to walk away from situations that diminished you and toward possibilities that expanded you. It was about understanding that sometimes the people who claim to love you will ask you to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger. And the greatest act of self-love is refusing that trade. My parents sent a text asking about Thanksgiving plans. I looked at the message for a long moment before responding. I had learned over the past year that rebuilding relationships was possible, but required new terms. They couldn't go back to treating me as their safety net, while treating Brittany as the one who needed protecting. Either we moved forward as adults who respected each other's boundaries, or we didn't move forward at all. I typed back carefully. I'm hosting Thanksgiving here this year. You're welcome to come if you'd like. Dinner starts at 4. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't forgiveness that erased everything. It was simply an invitation to show up differently, to try building something new on the foundation of who we actually were, rather than the roles we used to play. The lesson I had learned, the one that had cost me so much, but given me everything, was this: you cannot save people from the consequences of their own choices. You can only save yourself by making better ones. And sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. It's just living well, building something solid, refusing to be diminished by people who couldn't see your worth. I closed my laptop, finished my wine, and went inside to my home, my empire, my proof that the girl they underestimated had been stronger than any of them realized. Tomorrow, I would look at another property. Next month, I would close on another deal. Next year, I would expand into new markets. But tonight, I would simply sit in the space I had created and appreciate how far I had come from that small bedroom with the water-stained ceiling. Some stories are about revenge. This one was about redemption, the kind you give yourself when no one else will. And that it turned out was worth more than any amount of money or any size house, though having both certainly didn't hurt.